My name is Kevin Morgan, and I'm with the Town of Colony's Veterans Project, and today we're interviewing Mr. John Brokaw. It's approximately 2 p.m., August 28th, and we're at the Beltran Living Center. I want to welcome you, Mr. Brokaw, and thank you for working with us on our project.
Thank you.
Your full name, sir, just for the record?
John William Brokaw.
Your date of birth?
April 23rd, 1917.
Okay. Mr. Brokaw, I understand you've had a long career in the military.
Yeah, I'd say that.
Spanning from
November 30th, 1940 until 1952.
Until 1952. Well, today we'd like to concentrate on your early involvement, and we'll take it as long as time allows. Can you start by telling us where you were and when you enlisted in the military?
I enlisted with the first group to leave Ithaca, New York, under the draft as a volunteer, and went to Fort Dix from there. It was 1940.
What month?
November 30th.
It was November 30th, you said? Okay.
We were the first group to leave Ithaca.
And what was your occupation at that time?
Well, I was a bunker at the firehouse, and I worked at an ice cream store, made ice cream.
In a family business, or?
No, it was my brother-in-law's business.
A brother-in-law, okay. And what made you decide to enter into the military?
Well, at that time, I figured go in for a year and I'd be out, but it didn't pan out that way. Something else happened.
Something got in the way, yeah. And that would have been Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor.
And where were you when news of Pearl Harbor came about?
I was sleeping on the battlefields of Gettysburg.
And what did this is
We were on our way back from maneuvers back to Fort Dix.
I see. So it was a training period?
Training period.
And you were actually at Gettysburg?
Right.
And how did the news come through to you?
Everybody heard about it almost at once. As soon as somebody got word of it, it fled just like that.
What was your reaction?
Well, that's the end of my vacation. Now it becomes an occupation.
The party was over. But to go back to your time at Fort Dix, what do you recall your training period with when you first started?
Fort Dix was something I'll never forget, because when we went there, there was an awful lot of mud, and we had to put up our own pyramidal tents and scrounge for everything that we had. And to give you an example, people in the Army, they're great scroungers. And we got our cots in, we got our stove in, we got a fire burning. We went off to get something else. When we come back, somebody stole the whole stove. Took it to them. So,
With a fire in it and all?
Fire and all, they took it all. So you start over again.
Where did most of the fellas in was it a company of men? Or?
It was a company that I was in. Most of them were from Niagara Falls and Buffalo.
I see.
It was a National Guard unit that was mobilized, plus the volunteers that had been enlisted.
And what was your training specifically? Was it infantry?
Infantry. Basic training was at Fort Dix. But we went down to the Carolinas, Virginia, West Virginia, on several occasions for exercises, training exercises. And that's a wild country down there. You better be careful where you walk. You don't know who you're going to walk into.
In the southern states?
In West Virginia.
Oh, in West Virginia?
Yeah. I went up on the porch of a store one time, and I wanted to go in, but I didn't see anybody there. And I said, well, I better not go in till I'm sure there's nobody there. Pretty soon a guy comes around the corner with a rifle in his hand. He was a hunter, I guess, and I was on his property.
Yeah.
So I was glad I didn't go in.
And this is in the good old U.S. of A.
Yeah, those guys are squirrel shooters, you know. They're very, very careful about what they do, and they had everything under control.
Wasn't that something? All right, well, now, after your time at Fort Dix and when your training was complete, where did the military take you?
Well, we went from Fort Dix by truck in the middle of the winter after the war started and headed for Louisiana. Open 2.5-ton trucks. And another sergeant and myself had charge of all of the prisoners that were in the stockade at Fort Dix that were going along with us. So So we piled in a 2.5-ton truck and started, but we broke down in Philadelphia. And when we broke down, the temperature was below zero. It was steel bed trucks, colder than you know what. But Salvation Army came along. They picked us up, took us inside, fed us, and for that I was forever grateful.
Wasn't that interesting?
They treated us until the truck was fixed and put us back on the road. And,
To finish your journey.
And finish the journey to New Orleans, or in that area.
Yeah.
But we were later headed from there to Fort Lewis, Washington. So that was another long trip by train and truck. We went across the southern part of the state and up into Washington. It's beautiful country up there. All evergreen type trees. Our job was to watch the coastline to see nobody was coming ashore and doing damage.
Saboteurs.
So we were patrolling up in there.
So it was ongoing training as well?
Right. But part of that time I was spent training recruits that came in basic training. So
What was your rank at this point?
I was a corporal at that point.
Corporal? And you had that responsibility to train others?
Right. Corporal, I later became a staff sergeant. But that was a few months later. So it was virgin country up there, beautiful. A lot of rain, but it's still beautiful country. Wild country in a lot of places.
How did they house you?
We were in barracks.
Mm-hmm.
Not too far from Tacoma, so at Fort Lewis. So we were there, and then I got the notice that I was eligible for and was going to Fort Benning, the infantry school, to work towards a commission infantry. So I took the train and went down to Fort Benning. And we had the winter clothes on in a hot southern state. Very warm. Till we got changed over to khakis.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was getting near the end of the training period, which was a 3-month period, we thought we were going to go to Africa. So I wrote to my girlfriend, and I said, I think that we're going to go to Africa. So if you want to get married, come down to Fort Benning and we'll get married. And she came and we got married. And then I told the company commander about it. He was mad at me because I didn't tell him first.
Oh, really?
But it worked out all right. And from there, when I got my commission, I took her back to Trenton. And we had her neighbors. One of them was a priest. There were 2 others. So we performed the ceremony again with 3 priests. So I guess it became official at that point.
Wife, excuse me, but you had met your wife?
At the softball game. And her sister was going with a fellow who belonged to the company. And
She tagged along for the ride?
She tagged along for the ride. And I saw her, and I said, that's for me.
How did you carry on a courtship with all you had going on?
Well, she lived in Trenton, and I was at Fort Dix. So, and we corresponded by mail when I was in Washington, in the state of Washington,
Mm-hmm.
and also in Louisiana. So it was a long-distance courtship for a while, but
It lasted.
it lasted. Still going strong.
That's wonderful. All right, so after, now you got married, and you were still at Fort Dix?
No.
You'd moved her to Trenton?
No, she came with me to Cal. I was assigned to the Presidio of San Francisco.
Okay.
So I took her to California with me. I left her in a hotel, and she had some money. I said, I don't know when I'll be back, but as soon as I find out where I'm going to go, because I could be assigned anywhere.
So there wasn't any housing set up for wives?
No,
You had to find your own way?
She had to find her own way. So she was staying in a hotel for a while. And pretty soon she was on relief, getting help.
Subsidized, you mean?
Subsidized.
So they did have some programs to help?
No, she had to go and find some help from the Red Cross and other people to find quarters that she could afford. Because she had no idea where I was going to go, and I didn't know where I was going to go when I left her.
What training did you receive at the Presidio?
None. I was reassigned to a unit down south of there, which is maybe 40 miles, near Fort Funston, which is just south of there. And a small town called Clyde. An old building that housed CCC people during the Depression.
Civilian Conservation Corps?
Yeah, when we inhabited that. She came down and found a room in the town, Clyde. So she was only a couple blocks away from where I was for a while. Then I got shipped up to the northern part of California with another officer. It was more of an expedition to find out what was up there than anything else. That turned out to be non-productive, so we went back. We wound up moving to Fort Fleischhacker, it was just outside of San Francisco. And they had an Olympic-sized pool there.
What period of time is this, would you say?
Right after, well, within a couple months from the time I got my commission, it was in California.
Okay.
So we wound up in that area, and she found a place to live right on the coast, right on the beach. She outwitted a couple other old-time Army officers' wives getting the place where we got, because it was a beautiful spot right on the beach. The beach is below you, and a big window that you could see everything outside. The weather was good, so it was a nice thing. And eventually, I wound up going from there to the southern part of California for a short period of time, and then we went up to the north of Presidio for a while up there, and then see, I was it's getting rather hazy now where I went, but I went down to Fort Ord eventually, which is a good-sized Army base. And they gave us a lot of jungle-type training, in addition to that, the desert training. Everything was tropical in nature.
Pretty good indicator of where they were going to send
That's what we thought, but we wound up in the Aleutian Islands, which was anything but hot.
When did you ship out to the Aleutian Islands?
The exact year, I'm not sure what it was now, but it was about almost 2 years by the time I got my commission.
Mm-hmm.
But while we were there at Fort Ord, we did take a trip down to Los Angeles to go to one of the Rose Bowl games by train. And that was like being locked in a train at night and you couldn't get out. Everybody was drinking all over the place, and the windows were being broken. Like, wild. We get up in the morning, go out to get a ride to the ball game, and there's a sort of an island out in the middle of the road inside the town. And we got out there, and every bus that went by was loaded. So my wife and another lady who was in the crowd, they got out and pulled their skirts up a little bit, and the car stopped, and we all jumped in. Went to the Rose Bowl game. And they were gracious enough to even wait for us and pick us up and bring us back into town afterwards.
Oh, was that nice?
But University of Georgia got beat by Los Angeles, UCLA. 9-0, and all the score was down at our end of the field, so we had a good time.
Had a good day.
Not much sleep, but we had a good time.
Sounds it.
And then after that, we started getting ready seriously to go to the Aleutian Islands or some other place. So that was.
And you say you had a commission to what rank?
I was commissioned as a second lieutenant.
Second lieutenant.
And she was with me at that time. But when things started getting serious and we were actually on the verge of moving, and she was then pregnant, so I sent her back to New Jersey.
To be with family.
To be there. That was kind of a mix-up situation because I had a string of tickets about so long, to take us all the way across the country. And between Fort Ord and San Francisco, part of those tickets were lost. They didn't give everything to me that I paid for. So they had to wire back to Fort Ord and get the tickets. Then we got out to take her home. But that was quite a trip. It was one that had to be taken. She was then about 6 months pregnant. So anyway, we had a code worked out by city. If I mentioned this city in a letter, I was at such and such a place. So she knew about where I was going all the time. So we couldn't say where we were going. But
So your mail was being edited even at that stage, that early stage of the war?
They became suspicious, but they couldn't prove anything.
Right. But that's how you
That's how it
let your location be known.
Right.
So where were you prior to shipping to the Aleutian Islands? Where did they ship you out of?
Well, we went out of San Francisco. And going out of San Francisco, the weather is always rough, ocean-wise. And we were on these Kaiser ships, and they were very light. In the first 2 days out of San Francisco Bay, the water was so rough. There was over a foot of water down in the galley. So you had to go through this slush to get out, get your food, and go out on the deck and eat it. And there was more oil drums and other things like that up there. And oil makes you sick to your stomach anyway. And the waves were making you seasick. So we did.
Wasn't a pleasant cruise.
We didn't have much food in our stomach. Most of it went down and came right back up. Miserable stuff. But after a couple of days, it was all right. And we went into the Aleutian Islands. Stopped at a place called Adak. And if we were hungry, what we would do was drop a percussion grenade in the water, and it would kill the salmon. And they'd come to the top of the water, so we had fresh salmon. Not legal, but
Somebody was thinking, yeah.
we got salmon anyway. Good salmon, too. But the country up there at that time of the year was not bad. It was cool, the water was cold, but we were getting ready for a rough situation, so we had good equipment. The people that went into ADAC, and not ADAC, but the northern part from where we were, they didn't have the equipment, and they had an awful lot of frostbite. A lot of people lost parts of their legs. And their
American soldiers, you're saying, weren't equipped properly initially?
They didn't have the right shoes, they didn't have anything that was right for that kind of weather. They would have never bad
In Attu?
Attu, right. So
you're saying your equipment improved we had learned some lessons by the time?
You learn to be a procurer of equipment. And we had a chance to wander around there and see what was going on the island. And one of the fellows found a supply dump of equipment. So I sent 2 sergeants to go up and see what they could find. And they came back with shoes for the whole company. We had good cold weather shoes in the whole company. Nobody else had them, but we had them. The sergeants can do almost anything, They're scroungers by nature, I think. So anyway, we got our equipment, and when we got it back, we didn't dare to put it on right away, so we buried it under the tundra until we could put it on. And then when they found out that we had it, everybody got it. So it was a good thing for that. But Kiska was a climate where it was cold, wet, and the weather changed minute by minute. It was total sunshine 1 minute, the next minute would be fog. And it only took about 17 minutes to go from one to the other. And at night, we would just lie down on the ground and point your head or your feet where you wanted to go when you got up. Otherwise, you'd be disoriented. You wouldn't know where you're going. And if you're lost in the fog, forget about it. the planes would go over and drop bombs, but they had no idea where they were going.
So there was enemy activity, they knew you were there?
They knew we were coming, but they dropped the bombs and they left. When we got up on the island of Kiska, we actually found no Japanese soldiers at all. They had evacuated the day before by submarine.
Elaborate on that, if you would. How was the amphibious landing? How did that all go?
It went perfectly, except for one kid. I say a kid, he was a professional jockey, and we all had these rucksacks on, and he was just barely 5 foot tall with a rucksack, and when you went into the water, he went right out of sight. We had to pull him up and carry him to shore. It wasn't that warm to be walking around like that. But anyway,
so you were thoroughly drenched by the time you hit the beach?
Most of us were, yeah. And everything that we had in the way of equipment had to be carried up the hill. I mean, somebody would put a stove on the back and go up the hill. If you wanted food, that's what you had to do.
Were there any signs that the Japanese had been there?
Oh, yeah. There were signs. In fact, we got radio messages from Tokyo Rose that we were there. They knew. They left just a day before we come in.
And Tokyo Rose was the propaganda broadcaster?
Yeah, right. She greeted us. She was an American citizen, by the way.
Oh, she was?
She shouldn't be now, but she was at that time, yeah. Anyway, we finished that up and reorganized again. And somebody else took over the occupation, and we headed for Hawaii, which was quite a long trip. But
so how much time were you actually on Kiska?
A little over a week.
A little over a week. Were there any hazards while you were there?
Hazard, yeah. We had a vehicle called a Weasel, a track vehicle made by Studebaker. And every one of those things broke down the first day. They just were not durable enough. Anything that you want to carry up, you had to carry up on your back. Even a kitchen stove, you had to put it on your back and carry it up.
So that was supposed to be your mule, but it didn't serve you?
Right.
Did they mine the area or have any defenses there?
They did mine the shore, and I was very lucky. I had a lot of things that there's no rhyme or reason for why I'm here today, and that's one of them. Where we landed, it was all tundra on the shore, and I think it was 8 alligators. These are amphibious tanks, and my mission was to go around the left flank and see if there's anything over there. And I couldn't tell whether it was bombed or not, loaded with booby traps. But I was lucky to pick a spot where there was nothing there, and we went through single file without any trouble. But if we had been 6 feet either way, we might have lost everything from the booby traps.
So it was mined, and you weren't aware of it?
We weren't aware. We didn't know where they were, and you couldn't see them in the tundra. They're just squishy.
It was only afterward they were discovered, and you breathed a sigh of relief.
Yeah, we did that, but we got on the lake out there, and we had to get back in a hurry because we were in the fog, and we're becoming disoriented as to which way to go. So we got back all right.
All right, you left the Aleutians, and you said you headed to Hawaii?
Went to Hawaii, and we were stationed down at Schofield Barracks for a while. Another camp outside of there.
Did you view Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, we went to Pearl Harbor.
What impression did that make on you?
Well, I actually went and took a tour where they showed us everything, took us out to some of the things that were destroyed. Horrendous sight. When you think of all the people that went down with those ships and didn't get away from the wharf, huge catastrophe. I met a family from California while we were in San Francisco, and I was able to go up to their house and visit quite often. Myself and another officer, husband, wife, kid, and another family that lived nearby, whose name was Sergeant. He was a Sergeant York. That was his name and title. but he was in the American National Guard and was working on the island. And the father was a planter, and they were living there. They had been back in California or Nevada, someplace now, I don't know where they are. But I could go up there and stay the weekend.
So they just befriended you?
Just good friends. It was a very, very nice accommodation to have. They had a pool up in the mountains, which freshwater pool, and all the facilities for showers, for changing, you name it, they had it. But it was cold water, it was fresh water up there. I went swimming, fresh water in Hawaii. Waikiki Beach is not that good a beach if you've ever been out there. It's very narrow. It's maybe as wide as from here to that door in most spots. And it's something that is not virgin soil. It's stuff that's rubble. It's scattered all over the place. And every so often they have to bring sand in to fill it in.
How long were you in Hawaii?
Over a year, off and on.
And what did your time there entail? What did the Army have you doing there?
Well, we used to have to patrol in Honolulu at night with the regular MPs. Just see what was going on, sort of keep order. There are a lot of saloons and taverns and stuff like that.
A lot of servicemen coming through town?
Yeah, all the time. So it was more, I had to get a Hawaiian license, driver's license, but that was no problem. And drive around with them. But this family that I knew, the lady, she worked at the USO downtown in Honolulu. And she told me one day, she says, "You wouldn't believe this, but somebody broke into our place last night." And I said, "Did they do any damage?" She said, "Yeah, they took all the lists of the houses of prostitution in Honolulu." That's the only thing they took. But anyway, as a result of that, the houses were all checked regularly before that. But as soon as that happened, they split and they went all over the town and nobody knew where they were. So there was no control over anything at that point.
So it was that was regulated then?
It was regulated before that.
By the military?
No, the city.
Oh, city.
Honolulu was a tough place to drive around because of the one-way streets. I had a lot of trouble driving around with their car. But it was enjoyable. First recollection I have of that is we're up by the University of Hawaii, and I looked out there and these guys are running around barefooted. And the pavement is hot. They didn't wear shoes. It's just nature to, whatever they did, they worked without shoes.
Now, meanwhile, the Pacific War was raging, I have to imagine. Did you anticipate being deployed anywhere else?
Well, we knew that we were going to be, but it's just a question of when and where.
How did they keep you in a state of readiness? Did you have training while you were there?
Yeah, we had jungle training. In fact, part of that jungle training, they brought in a guy from the French Foreign Legion to teach us self-defense. And he said when we went into Kwajalein, he says, "I'm going to capture one without any weapon." And he did. I thought the guy was crazy, but
he was that good.
He was that good. He was not a big man, but he knew what he could do. And they taught us that. They taught us judo and the gymnasium.
How did you do in those training exercises?
I did pretty well there. I was pretty athletic at that point. I'd gone through all sorts of training schools, physical training, and that was my forte anyway, to be in that. We had judo training in gymnasium and stuff like that. But it was something you can still get pounded around, even though it's friends, you know. But we had to do it, so everybody took part in it.
Where did you go from Hawaii?
Well, we went Hawaii. First of all, Kwajalein is an atoll. It's like a horseshoe, and It's only maybe half a mile wide and maybe 2.5 miles, 3 miles long. All coconut palms. That was their sole source of food was the coconut palms. But we found that they would put the guy in a cargo net and tie him into the tree, and then he'd shoot until you went by. And then he'd pick up the next group. So you couldn't always see the guy because of the camouflage. So we wound up putting a satchel charge on the trees and cutting the trees out right off the under.
So Kwajalein was your first taste of enemy action?
Right, because Casualties you couldn't claim as, we didn't find any enemy up there. But we had probably the best coordinated attack I have ever seen.
How's that?
Well, we had air photos that were taken by planes and dropped to us on the ships, so we knew exactly what was happening day to day. And the ships that were in that area, our ships, nothing else could come in because they were guarding and all. So we had a lot of air cover, and the American troops put artillery on an adjacent island. So when it came time to fight, we had our own artillery on the island. We had artillery on an adjacent island that could hit any place on the Kwajalein, and we had the ships who would give us light at night, flares and everything, stuff like that. And they gave us pills to go for 5 days. You had 5 days to take the island.
To keep you awake?
Keep us awake, and that's what we did.
So they started with, did they do an aerial bombardment or just artillery bombardment?
Both, everything. But it was all coordinated, and every inch of that island was hit one way or another. And then as soon as we got our own artillery ashore, we had that plus mortars.
So it was an amphibious assault?
Right.
And did you take part in that?
Oh, yeah.
And what resistance did you meet when you hit the beachhead?
Nothing on the beachhead. We went in on the end of the island and worked our way up through. But going into the island, they would bury themselves in the mud and stuff like that. You really had to dig them out. Either that or in a tree. They put themselves in a cargo net up in a tree, camouflage them, you couldn't see them. They had some concrete bunkers, not too many, but they had quite a few. And we divided the island. Our regiment would go this way, and another island regiment would go parallel to us and go up from one end of the island to the other. And they gave us the 5 days to get it done.
And how long did it take you?
5 days.
It did.
But they gave us pills to stay awake, so we could keep going day and night. That was...
How was your equipment?
Equipment was good. We had no problems with that.
And at this point, you're a second lieutenant or first lieutenant? First lieutenant?
Yeah.
So you had a group of men under you?
Yeah, I had a platoon of AntiTank platoon, a 37 millimeter gun. So,
how did you transport that?
well, on the ships, and the cargo ships. The boats, the landing craft were big enough to handle it. It's not a big piece of equipment, but,
And then what pulled it around on the island?
well, we did by hand.
By hand?
By hand. We had no mules or anything like that that loaded them. There was not many.
Was it an effective piece of equipment for
Yeah,
in the jungle?
Yeah. Well, there wasn't much jungle. There was a lot of undergrowth, but there wasn't real jungle in it. The southern hemisphere, you're practically on the equator, so it's hot. And a lot of,
What month did you go into Quadra?
I think it was February.
In February.
Yeah. But they gave us these pills to stay awake, and we did it. We got through in 5 days.
Was there much resistance? Or was it more sniper?
Well, a little bit of everything. We killed over 8,000 Japanese on that island, and it stunk, believe me. Dead bodies all over the place.
In the heat?
And burst, I mean, they just exploded themselves because of the heat.
Any prisoners?
We didn't take any. I didn't. My unit didn't take any. And I don't think too many were taken unless they caught them in some sort of a, like a fox, not a foxhole, but a concrete bunker or something. They might take a few. You couldn't hardly tell because they had a lot of Korean workers with them that were prisoners. And you had to be sure you were getting Koreans and not something else.
Yeah.
So we got done in 5 days, and when we hit the next ship to get out of there, we had 2 meals and went to bed and didn't wake up for several days. The body can do an awful lot if you train yourself. But you take a lot of beating because nothing goes right. We get back to the island, we left there, went down to Hawaii again, and we did a lot of business of transports, different kinds of transports, both on sea and land, different kinds of trucks. We did a lot of jungle work down there.
More training.
More training, get used to the climate. And then we headed out, we wound up going further towards the Far East. And we wound up south of New Guinea and a little bit to the east of New Guinea on an island. We were very glad that we didn't have to go in there at that time, because malaria was a problem. And we had no drugs for malaria at that point. The Japanese control all of the land where malaria would be affected, and all of the things that you need to
Combat it. Quinine.
And we didn't have that until later. But when they finally did get it, well, we had it in time to go to Lady with it. And it worked. We were very insistent that they take their pill every day. It turned your face yellow, but we never got the malaria.
Didn't suffer from malaria.
Lady was, well, we were 10 miles inland when MacArthur waded ashore.
You preceded him by quite a bit.
Yeah, quite a bit. He is a very meticulous individual. He said you had an appointment at 12 o'clock, he wouldn't open his door until 12 o'clock, and then you'd come in.
So his reputation preceded him?
And succeeded.
And succeeded.
But
Did you ever see him?
Not in person.
No.
He took troops into Korea, a place called Incheon. And we went in there in occupation at Incheon, so I know what the situation was. But they landed all of their troops in one day and got them in on land. It took us a week to get ours in. But, the water at that port was up and down 20 feet a day.
Now, where's that?
Incheon. Up and down. So if you didn't get in, you're going to be grounded.
Yeah.
The ship would
Be sitting there, yeah.
So you had to get them in and get them out. But
Well, let's go back to Lady if we can. Now, there was a campaign there?
Lady was a huge campaign. Very tough terrain, a long ridge of mountains. One time we had 20 inches of rain on the place, mud all over the place, tractors that couldn't move any place.
Was there an amphibious landing made there as well?
Right.
And you were with the 7th?
7th Division.
7th Division.
Right.
And at Lady, were you still a first lieutenant, or you gotten a promotion by then?
I was a first lieutenant then.
Okay.
I didn't get my lieutenant or captaincy until I was in Korea.
So how did Lady go?
Lady was tough because of the heat, the terrain, the weather, the growth, the undergrowth. So you're really fighting everything against what little resistance you got, what little strength you got. And if you happen to get caught in some of this kuna grass that's over your head, there's no air in there, and that's suffocating, debilitating, and you can't see where you're going, and you don't know where the other guy is. So we went straight in to the mountain. There was a ridge of mountains that ran up there, and when we hit that, our regiment went further south and on a pass went over the mountains on the other side. Then another regiment was on our right, and then finally another division came in. But
a lot of the fighting that was taking place in our area was strictly jungle stuff. You go until you see somebody and then hope to God you saw him before he saw you. That's crazy. I mean, it's something you have to do, and it's the only way that you can do it, because you don't know where they are.
Did you sustain a lot of casualties in Leahy?
We sustained more from the physical end of it. A lot of diarrhea. I had diarrhea like I've never had before. Well, this is along towards the end when I was over on the other side of the island. But I had maybe 20 men left out of my company at that point.
And how many men in the company?
About 300 when we started. But a lot of it was
just from sickness and
heat prostration and stuff like that.
But of course, the Japanese were fighting under the same conditions.
Yeah, but they were used to it. Like the natives, they were used to it. Didn't bother them. But anyway, I was so sick, I took my rifle and shovel, left the company altogether, went outside, dug a hole, and let it all hang out. And believe me, it hung out. I've never been so sick in my life. We got out.
Now, weren't there any medical
they gave me
help with you?
Sulfaguanidine and Paregoric, which just relieved the pain a little bit. That's all. When I got out and I was in college, I had a reoccurrence of it. So I went to the family doctor and he says, well, what did they do for you in the Army? I told him. All right, we'll try that. So we tried that. It didn't work again. He said, all right, we tried the Army's way, now you're going to try my way. He gave me a huge dose of castor oil, and I haven't had a problem since.
Oh, my goodness.
That was his cure.
How long were you on Lady?
Oh, it was 3 or 4 months. Not all of it combat, but most of it was combat gig. I had a Bowie knife about that long. I think I brought it over here with me. The fire company, they shipped it over to me as a gift. I carried that thing every place that I went. For 2 reasons. You could use it as a weapon, and you could use it to cut foliage to camouflage your place where you're sleeping at night.
This was a gift from the hose company that you worked at?
I was a fireman.
Fireman in Ithaca?
Yeah.
And the fellows sent you a knife?
Yeah. So I was going on through a building. You had to check them out. So I went in the building, I went upstairs, and I sensed there was something behind the door. So I had this knife. I always carried that knife in my hand when I was doing it, the rifle in the right hand, but the knife in the left hand. I'd bring the knife up like this. There was a statue of Jesus Christ behind the door. I almost stabbed the statue of Jesus. Funny, but
well, you were at a high level of anxiety, and I imagine you...
I wasn't taking any chances.
Yeah.
You open a door, you don't know what you're going to find. You know, it might be a rattlesnake or something else. But the weather and the terrain is debilitating, really debilitating. There's no way that the average American person can survive.
Conceive of it, yeah.
Because we wound up with almost, well, at the end I had maybe 19 men left out of the company of 300. And
most of those casualties, like you say, were due to the elements and not the
combat. A large percentage was due to that. But when you're in the field and you're running into a jungle type terrain, you don't know what you're going to find. And you can find material there that was left by some other companies, grenades, booby traps, whatever. And
did you ever encounter any booby traps yourself personally?
Yeah.
What type of booby traps?
Well, they had what they call a bouncing Betty. If you tripped the wire, the thing would go up and hit you about this high.
Some type of a grenade?
Yeah, that type of thing, yeah. And some of them were cans with rocks in them and other stuff. Wires, if you trip a wire, like piano wire. I took 3 sergeants myself, and we were trying to clear out an area near our company. And I don't know how many times we ran up against a wire or something that would have set off a booby trap. but we caught it in time, so nobody got hurt. But that is an awful job to get involved in. You don't know what you're running into.
Your nerves must run pretty high.
Well, you're doggone cautious, I'll tell you that. You have to be, or you won't be around long.
How would you disable them once you found them?
Well, we had a choice. We could put a grenade on it itself to trip the whole thing, or throw a branch at the thing that was going across the trail. And a lot of those things, you wind up the wires right against your leg before you see it, because it's piano wire, and it's very fine. It's a miserable damn place to try to do anything. But we got through that, and we started to get ready for another invasion, which we weren't sure where we were going. That turned out to be Okinawa. And Okinawa is a piece of property that the Japanese have had control for a lot of years. And there was actually a training base for their artillery. Any place on that island you went, they could hit you. Didn't make any difference where it was. So we had the training, and we landed on Easter Sunday.
That'd be 1945.
Yeah. And to give you an idea what's going on over there, we had a lot of people who were injured or wounded or debilitated or whatever, and they were shipped out all over the South Pacific. And somehow some of them found out that we were going to go on another invasion. They go way more from the hospital to come back and join the ship, and join the company. I took one guy into Okinawa. He's on a crutch. He had a broken leg. He'd gone AWOL from the hospital to be back.
To be back with his unit.
Right, and it makes a lot of sense, because with a company that you've served with, you know what they will do and what they won't do or can do. If it's a strange company, they're mixed up with a lot of nobodies.
So they'd almost rather go back to their own country rather than take chances and be assigned somewhere they weren't
Because
familiar
you
with.
couldn't trust the man on your right or left.
So unit cohesiveness was a big factor.
We had a lot of them that came back.
How else would you have gotten replacements? The military just assigned?
Alphabetically. One time I had, I think, about 18 guys by the name of Mitchell. I couldn't tell one from the other. It's crazy, but
that would influence your effectiveness, you felt, when you...
Well, when I
had replacements that you didn't.
I never did get to know who we wanted.
Yeah.
They were there and gone all so fast.
So how did Okinawa come about for you? What was your personal experience there?
Well, we landed on Easter Sunday, and we cut the island in half the first day. And then we turned south where the real targets were. And there was a Marine unit.
Was there much resistance when you hit the beach?
No, none on the beach at all.
They wanted you to come ashore?
They let us come ashore. The northern part was kind of tropical in a sense. Much more vegetation that you could hide in, that type of thing. And some Marines went up to the north, but we went to the south. And down at the far end of the island, there's a place, it's a huge ridge line that goes from one side of the island to the other. And they were 4 stories high, where they were inside that doggone piece of rock. That's what it amounted to. And we had 4 divisions, 2 Marine and 2 Army, and we battled head-on in there for several days and couldn't make an inch. So finally the Corps commander called all of the leaders together, including my company commander, who happened to be a former professional football player.
What was his name?
I was going to say O'Rourke, but it was Bjork, B-J-O-R-K. He was a defensive tackle, Chicago Bears. And he was a man, I'll tell you. And we used to play touch football together, and I couldn't catch him. I thought I could run pretty good, but he was faster. Those guys don't know how to slow down, I guess. But anyway, he happened to be in the crowd that they were interviewing to find an idea how to, and he was pacing up and down, and they noticed his impatience. I said, Colonel, what would you do? He says, I'd go up at night. And that was a no-no at that time, with the kind of property we were trying to take. He says, I think you're right. So, goes down to your division, your battalion, your company. I got the lead job and the company job to go up that mountain. But we went up at night. The thing I really didn't like about it was they assigned a photographer to go with us and follow one private for the length of the duration. And those guys are crazy. They want to get a picture at anything. And we started getting some shelling. And because he wanted to get a picture, he got hurt himself badly in the face with a piece of shells. He wound up in Japan. I don't know how long he was there, but.
So your feeling was generally that a photographer could compromise your position?
They did all the time, and I didn't want them around. They were a hazard because all they were interested in was a picture. We wound up with another section of the island after we got over the ridge. There was a huge hole in the ground, and this building would fit down in it. And then there's caves going on all the way from down. And I had the job of going down with my company and cleaning it out from the top down. And I couldn't find the entrance to get in. So we climbed down through the trees to get down to the bottom and then into the tunnels. And we got in the tunnel, and of course it's dark. There's an underwater canal.
And about how many men would you say you had with you?
I had a squad of men, about 10 men. But we got in there, and one of the guys fell into an underground canal. And a grenade had gone off, and it scared him, and he jumped in or something. I don't know how he got in there. But we didn't miss him until about 10 days later. Finally realized that there was a guy missing. So I was ordered to go back and get him.
The tunnels were that complex that you got lost in them?
Yeah.
Did you encounter any Japanese in the tunnels at that time?
Not at that time.
But it was obvious that they'd been there?
They'd been there, yeah. The cooking materials were there and everything else. But anyway, we found him. He was pretty skinny, but he had fallen in the canal and come out on the other side, lost his rifle, and told he was living on the water from the canal switch. So we had to come out, climb up the trees, take him out.
Now, did he stay with you, or did you give him a little R&R, or?
Well, he went back to regimental control. They suspected there was something wrong there. He wasn't right, I guess. But anyway, a photographer heard about it, and he wanted me to recreate the scene. I told him to go to hell. I had been down there twice, and
that was enough.
Just so you can get a picture. And that's all they wanted was a picture. They weren't interested in who they exposed, you know. They exposed this one kid before they went up on the escarpment even. And he actually got blasted in his face. He didn't know what he was doing and didn't care about anybody. All he wanted was a picture. I wouldn't allow any photographer with my outfit if I had anything to say about it. And I didn't want any air support unless I ordered it.
Why is that?
They couldn't spot you.
So you could have been in harm's way?
Could have, and many people did get hurt that way. Other units that wanted close support.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a rifle company then, and then they're going so fast, not as fast as they are today, because the planes were slower then. But even then, the equipment was such that they couldn't really control it that close.
The accuracy, yeah.
You were liable to be dead meat.
Now that nighttime assault, can you describe that for us?
Yeah, we got the lead, and as I say, my battalion got the lead. My battalion commander gave me the job of taking the first company up. So we went up and we got on top all right. Now we start playing king on the hill. But we took control of the hill.
So in other words, they pushed you back, you pushed them back?
No, they didn't push us back.
They didn't. You held your ground?
We held our ground, took them back.
Did you climb the escarpment in the dark, or did you wait till morning for that?
We went through the darkness. The whole trip was in the darkness. We didn't get up there until daylight.
Were you under fire at that time?
No, there were booby traps in the town that we went through. There were dead bodies there, but no people. Only when we got up on top.
Were there many civilians on Guadalcanal?
Yeah, and the women, it's amazing. If they reach, I think it's the age of 80, they have a tattoo put on. And that's a mark of distinction for their age, I guess. Really a grand idea in a way.
How were the Japanese toward the civilians there?
They abused them, I think. Anything that they got in the way of help was forced help. As far as that goes, we milked their cows so we could get milk. Take advantage of what you get.
Yeah, how did your supplies hold up with the fact that you were in the jungle and moving?
Well, Okinawa was not jungle country.
Okay.
But it was difficult because we did have heavy rain there, and everything plugged up for a couple of weeks. Nothing could move, so you couldn't get supplies.
How was your food supply, let's say?
Well, there were days we didn't get it.
The days you didn't.
Yeah. We always try to carry some canned rations of some sort with us, but as far as a good hot meal, though, that was for a while there was pretty tough.
Ammunition?
Same thing, ammo stuff. It's heavy too. We started carrying it up to the top of a hill. We used the natives to do that when we could. They were used to the climate, they were used to the work, and far more durable than we were.
Wow, and you were in the best condition probably in your life?
Well, not after 30 days on one of those campaigns. I wouldn't say that. But they were used to pulling rickshaws, you know, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the climate didn't bother them. The disease didn't bother them. We caught everything.
Did you suffer many casualties in your unit
Yeah.
on Guadalcanal?
We lost almost 100%.
So you were very lucky.
Very lucky. I got hit, but it was long towards the end. We had another division that was on our adjacent left, and you always want to know where your friends are. So I had myself and another guy going out to check where their point was, and I got too close and I got a ricochet in my side.
Did it put you out of commission?
No. I put that back to the aid station, he patched me up and went back in.
But for that you received the Purple Heart?
Yeah.
Did you lose some close friends there in Guadalcanal?
A lot of close friends. They're all close friends. The most difficult thing for me was, I'll give you an example. We were the lead battalion in an assault, and we got ahead of everybody else, which was probably a no-no. And I wanted to pull them back where we have a good, safe position for night. And this one kid got hit hard in the leg, broke the bone against everything else in the leg. And there was no way that I could get him back to medical help all night. And the poor kid gave him sulfaguanidine and stuff like that, Paragoric. But
The pain he was in.
he had to be in pain. But I couldn't get him out.
That bothered you?
It bothered me, yeah, but on the other side of the coin, I would have had to take at least 9 soldiers to get him out.
Which would have left you under strength.
Well, under strength, and certainly put them into exposure, and I didn't know whether the guy was going to make it anyway.
Tough decisions.
Well, you had to make it, you know, that's why they pay you so much money.
By the way, how much was your pay? Do you recall?
I never saw all of it. Most of it went to my wife. She saved it. I don't know how she did it. She saved a lot of money.
So you were a good value to Uncle Sam.
Yeah. When I went in, I had a car, and it was fairly new, and I turned it in to the dealer, and my father turned it in, with the idea that when I got out in the end of a year, I'd get it towards a new car. Well, 5 years later, I got out, and they honored the deal.
Oh, for goodness sakes. Now, you have, this is the Silver Star?
Yeah.
What did you get that for?
I guess that was on Okinawa.
Didn't you tell me earlier you had a fellow that you ran out to help that had been injured?
Oh, that was on Kwajalein. He was a policeman from Sacramento, a huge stature guy, but he had a little musette bag with all the details that he was supposedly as a training officer and tactics officer, and he got hit and went down and broke a leg on him. And when I dragged him out, I just dragged him out, and I didn't drag the bag out. He said, my musette bag is out there, I gotta get it. So, okay, I went back out and got the bag and brought it back, opened it up, there's nothing in it but a bottle of whiskey.
You exposed yourself to the enemy fire for a bottle of whiskey.
Well, he needed it more than I did, I guess, because he was in rough shape. He couldn't walk it over. But anyway, that's
With
great.
regard to Okinawa, you said that there were a lot of casualties, both civilian and for the United States. We lost over, it says 72,000 casualties, 12,500 killed or missing. What's your recollection of the island? How many days were you on Okinawa?
From beginning to end.
Which was
A
a month?
Over a month.
Over a month.
Time to land. April 1st, the end of the war, whatever the official date was.
Was there an intensity of fighting? Was it almost every day? Or would,
Well, there's some facet of it every day, yeah. Except one stretch where there was so damn much mud that you couldn't go anyplace.
so it was a heavy rain period?
Yeah. It was one of those things where you gain 50 yards and lose 50 yards, then you gain 100 yards, that kind of thing.
Was there a lot of night fighting?
Not a lot.
No.
We weren't particularly good at it, although we did do it by patrols.
How would you rate the Japanese resistance on the island?
It's always tough, no matter where you go. They're very, very stubborn, and very well indoctrinated as to what they will and will not do. Although they did cannibalize some American soldiers.
How did you hear that?
We found the bodies.
Really?
So that
Do you think was that out of I can't say necessity, but it was were they that low on provisions, or do you feel it was an act of aggression toward us?
No, I think it was lack of provisions, matter of survival. You do almost anything.
My goodness.
It's hard to believe, but people will do anything. Some of them anyway.
How did you handle things like that when you came across that?
Well, I didn't come across it personally, but it did happen in our area. So, not much you can do about it. It's something that's already done.
How did you evacuate your wounded?
Well, usually there's at least 2 men and sometimes maybe 4 on a stretcher to get them back to where there's an aid station.
How far was the closest aid station?
It depends upon how much. Well, when I was hit, I was maybe 300-400 yards away from one. But there were situations where you could be a quarter of a mile away, just because of transportation problems. They couldn't get so close that they themselves were jeopardized.
How now? You said you were wounded in the side. It was a ricochet shot.
Yeah,
How was the aid that you received that day?
that was good. Took care of me.
And then you were back on the line.
Yeah,
Now you mentioned that the Japanese were dug in at Okinawa.
yeah. That was their island, and they had, as I say, any place that you went, they could hit you with artillery fire. It was an artillery training ground, is what it amounts to.
So a lot of men were killed because of that?
Yeah, sure. We took, I probably was one of the luckiest guys alive. On Okinawa, for example, we took this island, this piece of ground, and it was over here, and I had a tank. They fired from the tank. We ran underneath the fire over to an adjacent island, or adjacent hill, took that hill and then dug in for the night. And during the night, an artillery shell came over and landed about where you are from where I am, but it didn't go off. The next morning I looked up and I had a case of grenades, about 24 grenades, and everybody had grenades at night because sometimes it was close. I looked at those things and the grenades were on the ground, but the pins were out. Now somebody did that in production someplace. No pins in it, because when you pull those things out of the box, the handle goes off and the grenade goes off.
And
So-
not a one of them exploded.
Not a one exploded, although that artillery shell landed very close.
So you were doubly lucky on that.
Doubly lucky is right. And the fact that the grenades didn't go off, the fact that the artillery shell was a dud. And another time on a ship going over, you get up on the deck and you sleep on the deck, you hang your arm over the side. We were traveling without lights, no radio communication. And I looked up and this ship is that close to another ship, my arm in between. What woke me up, I don't know. Just one of those things.
Now in Okinawa in the caves, you mentioned that they had a lot of the Japanese had artillery well placed.
Yeah.
How did they have that in the caves with them?
Anyone?
Did they have the artillery in the caves, or where?
In the cave, just like on trolleys, on tracks. You slide them out and pull them back. Slide them out, pull them back. Close the door.
And how did you destroy those positions?
If we could with direct fire, but it wasn't always easy. We had to do it other ways, by burning them out with flame, flooding them out with water, that sort of thing.
So they were dug in, and that's the only way you could deal with them, was to leave them in.
You had to bury them somehow because you couldn't get them out. They wouldn't come out. Because at that point we were pretty well. They called that the Little Maginot Line. It was that strong.
When did things start to go toward a victory on Okinawa?
Well, it started to go after we got through that where the tunnels were underground, and we were going towards the beach, and we chased them out there. This battalion commander, Colonel Bjork, he recognized that I was tired, and he says, I want you to go out on this ship and just go up and down and see what they're doing out there. It was just an excuse to give me a rest. To talk about appreciation, I'd do anything for it. But he got me, I get out on the ship and I go to sleep. I didn't look for anything. I couldn't stay awake if I had to.
At that point, how long do you think you'd been on the island in a combat situation?
Oh, we've been from the beginning. April 1st is over a month. That's a lot of tough times.
Was it wrapped up by the time you got back, or was there still skirmishing?
Oh, we were still chasing them off the island. They were going to the edge of the island and jumping off the cliffs.
Really?
What were left.
Did you witness that?
Yeah. They did it on their own. And some of them wandered in afterwards. They'd stripped themselves of clothing and weapons and turned themselves in. Not too many, but there were some. But we did a good job on Okinawa. The casualties.
Well, that's what this article says. There were approximately 100,000 Japanese soldiers killed. It wasn't that big an island, was it? It must have been absolutely littered with bodies.
Well, it very easily could be that many. I don't know. I have no way of verifying it or denying it one way or the other. I know we killed a lot, but we believed in using artillery, at least in our regiment. It's a lot cheaper manpower-wise.
It
If you
saves
start
lives.
going head to head, then you lose people. You know, it gets to be an even proposition. You lose the same number I lose, you get no place. So we used mortars, we used artillery, we used air at a distance, but nothing close.
How was your communication?
We had radio communication with the rest of the battalion.
Pretty effective?
Yeah. Yeah, that's important to know who's on your right and who's on your left.
And you said you took severe losses within your unit while you were on Okinawa. Did anybody come through it like yourself that you kept in touch with after the war?
I had a first sergeant. Well, I had three first sergeants, I guess, before I was through with it. But he died in Texas afterwards. I used to keep contact with him. I met with some of the officers in New York City, but nobody lives in the area locally.
Do you think of your military service often and what happened back in World War II?
Yeah, but I try to put it in perspective as you did what you had to do. And if you couldn't do it, why, so you couldn't do it.
But ultimately, we took Okinawa. Did you feel that it was a goal, you know, that was productive?
It had to be taken for the use of the B-29s. They gave them support while they were coming on the mission from Okinawa, for example. So it's one section of the service supports the other. And if you do it wisely, you can do an awful lot of damage. And we had good artillery. One artillery unit were Mormons, and that's rather surprising.
They let the unit have that makeup?
We had the artillery units in our regiment, and they were so good that we would use those in training in following a rolling barrage. In other words, here, within 50 yards, we're following, and never had an accident. And so they would lay a pattern in front of your advance. Right. And I actually did that same thing in combat with those guys. And believe me, they saved an awful lot of lives. They were that good. So it's nice to have a good artilleryman in your Quadra, I tell you.
How did you feel after Okinawa? How did they declare it a victory? Was it
somebody put a flag up? I don't know. But when the war was over, we were in tents on the other side of the island, and the Navy started firing in all directions out there, celebrating.
So you remained on Okinawa until the atomic bomb was dropped in Japan?
Yeah. And the artillery, I mean, not the artillery, but the Navy ships were powering our tents going through. We didn't appreciate that a bit.
The celebration, in other words, got a little out of hand.
We took up a collection of all of the officers in the battalion to buy liquor when you get through. And I was one of only a few left in my battalion. I got 29 bottles of whiskey. So I distributed it to the enlisted men, which doesn't know. You earned it. Just don't drink it all at once. You take care of them, they take care of you.
So how actually did you get signaled? I mean, was it the naval guns that you heard that you recognized it, or did someone come and tell you that the war had ended?
Oh, we got it over the radio, I guess.
Over the radio.
But then we could see the guns out there, tracers going all over the sky.
Did you realize the war was that close to an end?
Yeah. After the bomb hit, yeah, we were pretty sure of that.
That they given.
But when we got through with Okinawa, we had about 30 days. We went into Korean occupation. And we landed the same place that MacArthur did when they made the invasion there. The water was up and down, 20 feet, up and down. You had to get in and get out, or your ship was stuck in the mud. And he did it in one day. It took us a week to get in there, in the salt. But that was quite an experience. We went and had an area, I had an area, and everybody else had an area to go in and check it out, see whether any soldiers were in there.
And how were there any Japanese soldiers in Korea?
Yeah, they occupied the thing.
And how were they toward you as an American soldier?
No problem. We went by one castle, and I looked in the courtyard, and at that point I only had myself and the driver left. Everybody else had been apportioned out. And there was about 100 Japanese soldiers with fixed bayonets and a company commander there in formation. And what the hell do I do now? You know? I went in, took the surrender. They surrendered. No problem.
Through an interpreter?
No. One guy knew a little bit of English, and that's it.
Piled their guns up and peaceably
stacked them up, and that was it. Later on, we used some of those same people as policemen, along with the Koreans, who hated their guts, and put them in teams. And they would work together, and we never had an incident with that. So, but in my era, we had a YMCA, and I went in and met the guy that was running it, and he invited me to bring my whole company in any time I wanted. So we did, and we wound up playing a game of basketball against the Koreans.
How'd you do?
We didn't do so good. we were dead tired from Okinawa, and those guys train pulling rickshaws. You don't keep up with them. But
so you won the battles, but they won the basketball game.
They won the basketball game. We went up to his house afterwards. His daughter was being married. The groom was there, and the wife was there, who happened to be a physician trained in Japan, which is an odd thing. And the groom was the low man on the totem pole, believe me, in the family hierarchy. Everybody came before him. But his wife, as I say, was a trained physician in Japan.
So did they invite you to the ceremony? Did you witness that?
I got drunk, but so
you had what an interesting thing to see see their culture. You know what, I wanted to ask you about some of these medals, if you don't mind explaining them to us. Is there any particular order?
No, not necessarily.
Why don't we start with the one in the middle?
Well, that's a combat infantry badge, and you're only entitled to wear it if you have been in combat. There is one without the wreath for passing a series of tests, but not combat.
And the Silver Star?
That's a Silver Star. And this is Asiatic Pacific Theater with the number of invasions that I've made.
For which there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
Yeah.
And how about this, the Bronze Star?
It's Bronze Star.
What were you awarded that for?
Well, a couple of things. Saving somebody's life, that type of thing.
Do you remember the incident? You must today.
I forget exactly what it was now.
Okay. And what's this one?
That's a New York State medal.
That was with your time with the Selective Service?
Yeah. Purple Heart, Legion of Merit. This is primarily for time with the Selective Service system. How I got tied up with them, I got called back for service in 1950, and I wound up stationed in New York. And we had these units training, mobilization units, and one of them happened to be a Selective Service unit that came under my administrative decision, my administrative position. And these people, before World War II, even were in existence around the state. They represented all branches of service, but they did their training studying the Selective Service law, the operation, how to find manpower when you need it, and any other thing, the transportation of people to induction stations or physical examination. That was their job to learn that routine. And they came under my jurisdiction, and one guy asked me, he says, would you like to meet the State Director of Selective Service? I said, sure. So I was in New York, he was in Albany. But I went up to Albany, and it turns out he's an ex-infantry officer, served on the Mexican border. And he says, I can't take you now, but when you're totally discharged, let me know. And he says, I want you. So.
Now, was that this General Hershey?
No,
at this point, that was someone else.
Colonel Bowden, in Albany. He was working as state director of selective service then. And so I wound up, as soon as I was released, I notified him. I got a call on a Friday. You don't know, but you have to be on duty Monday. So I left my wife again. She's getting used to it.
Oh, my goodness.
But anyway, I wound up in Buffalo for a year and a half. And then I went out to Buffalo and had the area field office for several years. And I came back to Albany as operations officer and deputy state director. And then when he retired, the governor recommended me to the president to be appointed as director of selective service for New York State. And then New York State is upstate New York and Long Island. New York City has an equal headquarters. The population is about the same in each thing. But putting the two together, they're both different. The problems are different. They have no agriculture down there, as an example. We have a lot of it. So it was a different ball game.
How many years did your military career span?
50 some odd years, 52 years ago.
Very impressive. Very impressive. Well, Mr. Brokaw, I want to thank you for participating in our project.
Well,
It's nice talking to you.
I enjoyed it, and I certainly am proud of what happened. Lucky man that I am, in more ways than one.
I'll say thank you.